أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Welcome to Receiving Nur weekly Quranic study. We are continuing to journey in 33 windows. This will be our last session before Ramadan. Inshallah, during Ramadan, our timing will be a different day and different time. It will be, inshallah, on Saturdays at 2 p.m. Eastern time. So this is our last Wednesday evening before Ramadan. We are going to continue with 25th window. Actually finish up 24th and then start 25th window, inshallah. And Dr. Yamina is going to lead us as usual. Jazakallah khair, Dr. Yamina.
Thank you, Isra. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. So we did say that we may carry on with the part 2 this week, but at the end we still went through it. So if anyone wants to maybe summarize or just share anything they want to share about the window from last week, the 24th window.
One thing that I found interesting in this window, helpful, it's about death, and death enhances the message of life. The 23rd window was about life and how life is this immensely important window or mirror onto a sanad, to the self-sufficient one. And this window is on death. And here one thing that was interesting is that death it's through death that the light of life becomes more clear. Here, in the case of spring, the going of the spring is also a sign in a way that it actually enhances the sign of the spring itself, the death of spring, the winter. Did anyone want to say something?
Assalamu alaikum.
Yeah.
How are you? So if my Zoom stays connected, I hope I can actually go outside. I don't know if you can connect the video. I'd like to share our family garden, and I'm just hoping that the internet will stay connected. Is that okay? Can I show the video?
That sounds fun.
Okay. Let's see. Can you see me?
Yes, you do.
Okay. Alrighty. So I'm walking outside. Okay. So last spring, we decided, we were inspired to convert the front lawn into what's called a food forest. And it's simply an endeavor to try to plant as many edible perennials as you can to, it sort of has a social justice spirit to it. Let's plant as much food as we can everywhere so that, food is growing. And it started with taking our front lawn, which, tell me, can you see right now? Because I don't see that you can see any screen. Can you see something?
Yes, we see
Hello?
you and a little bit
Okay.
of the.
Okay, all right, so here we are. So this is, it was just a simple, just grass. It was very plain, very boring. And where the transformation that took place started with changing the foundation, of the planting area. What that meant was adding, not actually into the earth or changing anything that was already there in terms of like taking out weeds or disrupting the life under, simply adding organic matter on top. And on top of that organic matter, everything that will go into the garden is something that comes from another spot, on planet Earth. And you are simply killing off the grass by adding the mulch on top so that you can rake back the mulch and you'll be exposed to the soil, and then you can plant as many things as you like. And the point is to plant something that can, produce food for humans in need and animals and insects in need. So by last fall, this was like a big effort to get all these wood chips, all over the yard. And then by last fall, we had planted some 40 or something bushes. I'm just hoping you don't disconnect, but you'll see like really small bushes that were planted. This twig here coming out of the ground when we first planted it last year. And we were really concerned that they weren't going to make it, and that the work and the investment was, it was very risky. And and then, so, we're nervous. We prayed to Allah that it would, that life would come. The death of the fall and the winter, and the feeling of vulnerability that we had of, will life come back to this garden, that was so, it brought so much closeness in our prayers. In the second and part 2 of the 24th word, where how he's pointing out that past springs and future springs, they actually tell us more about his name of everlasting and the one being in control than even the current spring. This is exactly how I feel, because it's remembering how lifeless this garden was last year, being simple, that is transitory. Actually, these leaves, and then it's in his hands once again, like it always was. It wasn't the, it wasn't the great compost that we added, and it wasn't the, awesome gardening techniques that we employed. Because when we put everything, our garden tools to rest last fall, we said, we don't know if it's going to come back. We put so much work into this. Will it even come back? And we realized we had no power at all over spring coming and these plants coming back to life. And some of them didn't come back. We lost probably about 30% of the young bushes that we planted, and we couldn't have determined which ones would have. Nothing that we did. We added the same amount of organic matter all over the yard, the same amount of wood chips. We protected them all from the rodents all the same way. We had no control over which ones would come back, which one. And, so the same thing is going to happen. I can't keep the green leaves on these little bushes. And it just makes me feel like we're just in this we're just in a flow. Everything is constantly changing. And there's only the present moment, and whether or not I'm in spring or I'm in fall, it's the same truth over and over again, that this garden is completely dependent on its creator to make it grow. And every season says the same thing. So I hope that you got to see some, right now it's nothing fantastic. It just looks like very small bushes on wood chips. But what will it be next year? That's all in Allah's hands. And how will it change and change? And I have no idea which ones are going to grow, which ones will not. Will some, new variety appear that we weren't expecting? And so we have no way to, to be the ones in control of this situation here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Jazakallah khair, Inaba. Like what you are showing us is like the beginning of the journey when there's so much uncertainty, and that's an amazing place to be in. It's interesting because I have the same experience with my father, who planted, like he always had in his mind that plants have to be edible. So he planted pear trees, but because they've been here for a while, like I have witnessed like them bear pears, and I've witnessed sharing the pears with the neighbors, then bearing pears again. And then now it's almost an expectation for me when winter and fall comes, like, when they're like seemingly dead, I have an expectation of it coming back again. But the stage that you're in is a beautiful stage where you don't know what to expect, and you're waiting for Allah's mercy. And you're like, your prayer is to see life coming out. So that's a beautiful stage. Jazakallah khair for sharing.
Thank you, Jazakumullah khair, both, for sharing. And I actually had a question on this that I thought I would ask today, and that's from part 2 here. Here it says in the second sentence, as a matter of fact, past springs have disappeared along with their seeming causes, al-asbab al-zahiriyya. The fact that new springs came after the ones that vanished shows that seeming causes are nothing, they have no effect. So I wish we could unpack this a bit more, because immediately what I thought was, well, the weather was warm, so things come to life. I mean, I don't think of it this way, but there was this kind of question that also came to me that I felt I needed a clear answer to. So now the weather changed, so of course it's not blossoming anymore when the winter comes again, or we put, as Anabe was saying, we put special fertilizers, but now they're finished, so then it's not blossoming anymore the next time. And there's something deeper going on here in this text. It's saying the spring, along with its causes, seeming causes, whether it's weather or fertilizer, have disappeared. And the fact that the causes disappeared along with their effects show that it wasn't the cause. What we think as the cause is not the real source, real cause. It's easier for me to think about this with human beings, parent and then a child, I think in the footnote here as well. It looks like the baby is coming from the parents, so then it looks like the baby is made by the parents, but then parents pass away and baby passes away too, but parents pass away. If they were the source of existence and life for the baby, how could they themselves lose that? If they are the givers of life, how come they lose life? So it's easier for me to see in the case of human beings or parents, but in case of the springs, I wanted to ask if we could explain this a bit more. What does it mean?
Do we have to wait until the parent to know that the parent will pass as soon as the baby is born? there is no direct relationship with the parent, except like the parent caring about the baby, but not directly producing, creating, sustaining, giving life. But before birth, it could seem that way if we don't question it.
Yeah, so in this window, there are both things, right? The spring is passing, and then also the seeming causes through which spring is brought is passing. So in the case of baby and the parent, it looks like the baby is coming from the parents, but parents pass too. You're right that I don't have to wait for the parents to die to see that they weren't life givers to the baby, but it's one of the additional signs in this part too, that there is a significance of the fact that the apparent causes, the seeming causes, are also passing. So parents do die, and if that shows one more time that they weren't the life givers. But how do we apply that to the spring? The causes of spring passing, like the weather.
Well, it's not only the weather, because while the weather is still warm, still some flowers, for instance, will pass and new ones will come. So there are other factors involved. The point is that all those factors eventually, the weather eventually will, let's say the warmth will eventually leave. It's actually a position of the sun will change.
Mm-hmm. So that's like the parent dying and showing once again that it wasn't the source of life. Yeah, actually,
if it was the source of life, it shouldn't change.
Yeah,
it doesn't have, if it's itself is not permanent, if itself is not constant, then how can it can't even guarantee its own permanence. How can it be the source of anything?
True.
Yeah, someone wants to share, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
This is Zabida. I put my hand up to share. Yeah. I interpret this as spring. Spring is like a sign of life, and everything pops up in spring, the plants, the trees, and there is life. And to me, this is evidence of life after death, because life, all the plants die, and then you have this barren land, and until the rain comes, and we know that the rain is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and He's the only one that can bring life and give death. So the spring is a sign to me of life and death. And so when it says that past springs is a clear witness to God, yes, because when the plants have come up and the crops have come up, the season, I'm ignoring the weather, but of course the weather is in control of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Just that past springs, they're constantly, life and death, constantly the cycle is happening, and it's happening with Allah's qadr and power, and we don't do anything. I was admiring my garden earlier, and subhanallah, there is a ground squirrel who's been digging. At first I was annoyed that he's digging holes in my garden, but he's actually doing the gardening, because all my plants have sprung up amazingly. And sometimes I'm dedicating this to this, the role of this animal has done something, but actually it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who's given the animal that insight and skill to move the earth around and make my garden flourish. And soon all the flowers in my garden are going to die. And then again, they will spring up again without any help from me, doing nothing. So spring for me is a sign of life after death, evidence of life after death. If anybody doesn't believe in life after death, spring is a sign of life after death. That's the way I looked at it. And then the next paragraph talks about death of living beings. That's all I wanted to share. Thank you.
Thank you. So all this is correct here in this window. We are going into the preliminary steps, like before we get there, like we said, rain comes from Allah. How do we know it's from God? This is what we want to cultivate within us. This iman, this certainty, this yaqeen, that when we witness, when we see, when we experience rain here and now, we see it as we are told in the Quran, it is we who send the rain. But usually we experience it as it's coming on its own, or if we have been to school, we may try to explain it through the cycle of water cycle. But how we feel in our heart is it's coming, and then we add onto it, but it's from God. So now we want to bridge these two so that they will become one, so that what we see will confirm that it is from God, will be the evidence and the witness. That's what ayah is. It is that's why we're told in the Quran that the creation is alam al-shahada, the realm of, or the world of witnessing. We will listen to the rain, and we will have that certainty that it is someone with this qualities is sending this water. So we won't say it is coming, I know it's coming from God. Each time I witness and experience the rain, my certainty of who God is will increase. So because if we rely on one conception of God, and every day, as we're told in the Quran, ما خلقت هذا باطلا, the conscious believers say, you have not created anything in vain. So we know it is, everything is mirroring and reflecting the beautiful names of God in new ways, at new levels, in different varieties. And so we get more and more acquainted with the beautiful names of God and feel closer and closer to certainty, to know who He is with His beautiful name. Because at the end of the day, we are not here to not deny God or to say that everything is from God. That's what all believers in any religion will say. But as students of the Quran, in the Quran, we are taught to know who God is, and to be a Muslim is to witness the Shahada. When we say, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, I witness and testify, I cannot testify without witnessing, that there is no deity, nothing worth worshipping, nothing that has power on its own and control on its own except God, Allah. Then this formula, I can apply it to any of the names of God. It means La Razzaqa illallah. There is no provider except God. La Qadira illallah. There is no powerful illallah. There is no, I can, because all those names belong to Him and describe Him for us. So all what was shared is correct. Now here, there is an emphasis on the everlasting one. And especially in the part 2, is saying that the past springs testify even more clearly to the everlasting one, because as Isra mentioned at the beginning, because they act like a contrast, like a background reflecting the giving of life. Life becomes more apparent in the background of death. And Isra's question, or what she wanted to reflect more about, is the fact that it's not only spring going, but all the seeming causes, because unless we stop and reflect consciously in the way we are taught in the Quran, then it would seem to us as if things are, one thing is making the other. We don't say one thing is producing, creating the other, but in a way it seems like one thing cannot happen without the other. A plant cannot grow without water, for instance, without rain. And if we really ask ourselves, is it true? Is it possible? We say yes, but it can't. Allah is creating them together, but like, of course you need rain. But that's not the point. The approach is that we are taught in the Quran is that, can you just stop before you put God into the equation? Can you just look at what is going on? فَلْيَنْظُرِ الْإِنسَانِ, we are taught in the Quran. Let human being look at his food, look at the earth after it was death, how it is brought to life. So look at it, and then we will see that this water is coming in and life is coming. And it seems like, yes, even if water is not growing it, but like, okay, still has a role there. But in the Quran we are taught to question it. Can this lifeless water give life to anything? Obviously, something lifeless can't give life. And so he says, we are the one who give life with this lifeless water. So they are created together. So our first, and then we call one cause and the other effect, is only a perception. Actually, they are coexisting and created at the same time, all together as a system, that connection is part of actually the area is in the relationship, in the relationship between, and so here one of the causes, rain was good. Thank you for mentioning rain, because we said weather, but rain is more palpable. So we say there is rain, but rain comes and then it becomes part of the plant. So if rain was, or water was a creator or part of the creators, the small, then how come it cannot even protect itself, because it itself is absorbed and it becomes part of the plant. Like the plant is more powerful than it, because it's now subjugated and it's made, it is at the service of the plant. So it can't be. And there was a window about taskhir, subservient, how things are made subservient to the others. That's also is a window onto knowing God in a new way, and it reflects the beautiful names of God. So rain is a very good example, because water comes and then lo and behold, part of it will be evaporated, but mostly it will be absorbed by the earth, the soil, and
Dr. Yamina, you're muted. We don't hear you.
all this time I was muted?
No, just like 20 seconds ago.
Okay. So it was just about the
Mhm.
The water, if it was, if it had any power, if it could produce anything, if it was truly an efficient cause, then how come it cannot even take care of itself and it becomes part of the plant? So is it causing the plant, or is the plant using it? It's like the egg and the chicken. It's neither, because that kind of question is already coming from a horizontal, disconnected perception of the world. And
Dr. Yamina, so this sentence here, the death of living beings, along with their seeming causes, shows. So this is a sign that we are trying to understand a bit more. And what is so interesting is that if we can see that not only the effect, the spring, goes away, but also its seeming causes, additional spring rains, they disappear. The warmth disappears or decreases.
or increases like in the summer, or increases in summer.
Yes, and after the summer is the fall.
Mm.
Yeah, so seeming causes shows that they can only be created by a powerful, glorious one. And the only here is very, very important, because as you said, we don't say just the natural causes are making things happen. Many people say there is a God who makes things happen. As I told last time, even my students, they say, God has a role. He has a role in this. But only he is the life giver. Only this powerful, glorious one is making this happen.
He doesn't need them. They are not helping. They are part of the whole, because we see things separate.
Exactly. He says, powerful, glorious one who, with his wisdom, connects life with these seeming causes. But these seeming causes have no effect. It's just that the creator who gives life chooses to connect life with this weather, life with water, but they have actually no effect. And how do I know this? One, itself, that how can it give life? It doesn't have life. How can it give life? That's one window. Another window is this one, that they disappear. If they are the sources of life, they shouldn't disappear. If they are the ones that make things exist, how is their existence disappear? How do they go out of existence and die? So
The existence is continuing on so many things.
Yeah. Thank you for unpacking that. I think somebody wanted to talk. Inabe, did you want to?
Yes. Yes, both the rain, focusing on the rain, and then how you followed up with it, Isra. It reminded me of if I was going to pray to, if I'm depending on a cause, a second to bring back my first year garden to life. The problem is there's so many that I don't know which one to pray to. Like there's so many things that were apparently responsible for bringing back the garden to life. Not only rain, but the earth had to turn. The earth had to, turn 365 times, and it had to go around its revolution, and gravity had to work until next year, and the atmosphere, the ozone needed to stay in place, and 1,000, not 1,000, a countless number of other seeming causes. The worms needed to stay alive to nourish the soil of the garden. The animals in our neighborhood needed to stay in perfect balance so that the rabbits didn't overpopulate and eat everything in sight. Like there were so many. If I was going to pray, if I was going to depend on a cause, I wouldn't be able to even pray to how many of them are seemingly need to stay in place in order for the garden to come back. And so it just reminds me of how senseless that would be. If somebody is going to place your hopes in, if you're going to place your hopes in one cause, like why are you choosing that one over another? As Yamina said, like, are you saying that the water becomes subservient to the plant? So we have to decide which one of these causes is the one that's really in charge. If not, we're going to be praying to all of them. And that is actually the case. We have to decide what, we have to figure out what is in charge here, you know, and that's pointing us where we need to go.
True, true.
And then the fact that it's good that you listed this variety of apparent seeming causes, because, you know, the worm itself dies, and the squirrel who, you know, works on the soil dies. Like all of these apparent causes supposedly bestowing life on your garden, they themselves die. So they can't be sources.
And through their death, they are also speaking. They speak through their life, and they speak to their death. Mm-hmm. Actually, the 25th window is, in a way, a generalization of this point that life speaks and death speaks. The life of everything speaks, and
There's a comment in the chat box that says, Zubaydah says, everything in life and universe is interconnected.
true.
Yeah.
Very
That becomes a sign. Yeah, that's
very important, because of that point, everything becomes such a clear sign. Yeah.
That's another sign. The interconnectedness is a sign that being has control over everything must be doing this. So maybe we can then move on to 25th word if no one else wants to say anything about 24th window.
Yeah. So inshallah, someone can read the 25th.
Isra, there's a hand up. I think, and I had my hand up.
Oh, please go ahead.
So I didn't know, Hanan's hand was up before me. Did you want to say something, Hanan, about the 24th window?
I wanted to ask a question regarding the vertical relationship, but I'm not sure how much it's relevant. The vertical horizontal relationship.
You can ask and we'll see if it is related.
Okay, so my question is, if there is a way, Dr. Yamina, that you can just like, you know, like quickly touch on how Prophet Muhammad, the epitome of human beings, have always handled the events of his life, the year of sadness and all of these things we read in his seerah. How did he experience them via vertical relationship, not via the horizontal relationship? How I would have experienced them via horizontal relationship and the sadness I felt when I'm reading his life until later on. Only now at this age I'm learning that he wasn't mourning like me, because it was all vertical for him.
This is a process that we are all learning, and we are all praying to be closer and closer, but how he experienced it, Allahu A'lam. We're trying to get a glimpse of that and get closer to that hal, but like Allahu A'lam. But we know that what we are taught in the Quran is to look at everything as ayah, as being created here now, as speaking about God and reflecting his beautiful names here and now, as glorifying him. and that pertains to Alam al-Malakut that was introduced in window 18, I think, and the Tasbihat in many windows, and especially in 19. And so far, these have been an unfolding of what is meant by Malakut and Tasbihat and how everything is in the window before 23. We saw how everything life and everything being alive is glorifying God and making him known. And so that's what we are learning through these windows and before as well. And actually we started these windows because there were so many questions about how do we learn this, like step by step from the very beginning, instead of like picking up in different levels. And that's why we started these windows. And these windows actually are all related. And it's like, in a way, it's like a ladder. These windows we are going up and up and up. So that's all I can say.
Is there a book, Dr. Yamina, that you recommend from the so many books I've read about the Sira from his birth till he got the message? Is there a book that you recommend that you can see in it that it kind of focuses on how he must have role modeled it to us somehow?
Yeah, but for me, I don't know such a book, because we can talk about the Prophet, about what he did, or even about what he said. We can even talk about the Quran in a way that is horizontal, without realizing, because we have not learned the vertical way. So I don't know about such book about the life of the Prophet. However, when we say Sunnah, okay, I'm not talking about the Sunnah in fiqh terminology, but Sunnah in general, the Sunnah of the Prophet, the way he lived. Part of it is his life and words, and an inner, that's the outward aspect. And the inner aspect is how he understood and lived the Quran. And so what we are doing is going through the teachings of the Quran, and the more we perform and experience it, and not only understand but practice what we understand, the more the so-called Sunnah, that when we hear about the Prophet said this, did this, will start making sense within that Ihsan dimension. The Ihsan looks to the consciousness and the mindfulness of Iman, of the believer who has conscious Iman.
Okay, thank you so much.
You are welcome. So inshallah. Oh,
Assalamu alaikum.
wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
I just heard the question about Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. If she wants to know the character, there is the best book I read. I'm still reading, Shifa Liqadi Ayyad. This is a very good book. You can know who was Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Talking about his childhood, about his prophecy, about his character.
It's a well-known book. Yeah, it's a well-known book. True.
Very known and very good book. This is the first time I started read it 1 week ago. I was amazed by the character of Sayyidina Muhammad. I was thinking I know Rasul, but I don't know anything about him. Sorry, like the Quran, I don't understand. Now I discover that I don't know him. Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is something, it's the light of our life. Noor is for him, this creation all of what we are living, those nuraniyat, is from rahmah, is coming from Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allah give him this. It's a beautiful book. If you read it, inshallah, it will maybe she will find some questions, maybe some answers, I mean.
You can also, now that reminded me, the 19th word in the Risale Nur is about the Prophet, the miracles of the Prophet Muhammad, and it has lots of references to Shifa.
Yeah, that is very good book. You have to, I think she, if she, in Arabic, it's very nice. Of course, she can find it maybe in English too, because it's very good book.
Actually, I just Googled it and found it in Arabic. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you are welcome. This is a very good book. If you can read Arabic?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's very good. I will enjoy reading.
And then I'll also look for what Dr. Yamina is saying. He said the word number 19. I found it. Alhamdulillah, Isra sent it to me in Arabic as a book. So
Okay.
I can go to word 19, you said, and that's...
And when she said Qadi Iyad, I remembered because there are lots of reference to that book in the 19th words.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for reminding us.
Jazakumullah khair.
Okay, so then inshallah we can start 25th window. Who would like to read? So our, as you know by now, our style is to read to get a sense, and then work sentence by sentence. So who would like to read? Oh, Ali, you had some before that?
No, I was just like, I saw Hanan's hand up and I just wanted to let you know.
Okay.
But I can read. So 25th word, 25th window, Bismillah. Like one struck points to the striker, and a finally fashioned work of art necessitates the artist, and an offspring requires a parent, and an undersurface demands a top surface, and so on, like all these qualities known as relative matters, umur idafiyya, which are not absolute and cannot exist without each other, contingency, imkan, which is apparent in particulars in the universe, as well as in it as a whole, points to necessity, wujub, and the state of being acted upon, which is to be seen in all of them points to an act. And the createdness apparent in all of them points to creativity. And the multiplicity and composition to be seen in all demand unity. And necessity, an act, creativity, and unity clearly and necessarily require one who is not contingent, not acted upon, not numerous, not compounded and created, but bears the attributes of being necessary and agent, one and a creator, in which case all contingency, states of being acted upon, createdness, multiplicity, and composition, testify to the necessarily existent one. Wajib al-wujud, the one who acts as he wills. فاعل لما يريد, the creator of all things. خالق كل شيء, the single one of unity. الواحد الأحد. In short, just as necessity is apparent from contingency, the act from the state of being acted upon, and unity from multiplicity, and the existence of the former indicate the latter with certainty, in the same way qualities like createdness, and having all their needs provided for, which are to be seen in beings, clearly point to the existence of attributes like making and providing. In turn, the existence of these attributes point necessarily and self-evidently to the existence of an all-compassionate maker who is a creator and a provider. That is to say, with the tongues of the hundreds of attributes of this sort which they bear, every being testifies to hundreds of the necessarily existent one's most beautiful names. If this testimony is not admitted, it becomes necessary to deny all the attributes of this sort pertaining to beings. جزاكم الله خير.
Thank you, Alia. Was there anyone who was going to present today, inshallah?
No.
No. Okay.
SubhanAllah, it feels connected. Like I feel like it's drilling the same points that were brought up in the discussion of the 24th word with the multiplicity of causes. There has to be one in control. That the rain becomes part of it, like, the examples that you gave, the rain becoming part of the plant shows that the rain is subserved. That everything is interconnected, is pointing to the one. So I feel it's like saying the same thing, but in a different way. I don't know if that's correct.
Let's say it's a more explicit level, because in the other one, it was at another level. These things were not so explicit, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
If you remember, in the 18th window, it was a reflection of أَوَلَمْ يَنْظُرُوا فِي مَلَكُوتِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. Do they not look at the malakut of the heavens and the earth? And the 18th windows was, the malakut was, it was not yet, it was like the first step to introduce the concept of malakut being something that this world that we live, we experience, point to, indicate. So it looks to meaning, to purpose. And remember, it was like if there is a fi'l, an act, there is a fa'il, there is an action, an agent. And then there is a name of that agent, and then an attribute, and then a quality of that agent, and then the essence of that al-ilahiyya. And in the 19th window, it was about تسبح له السماوات السبع والأرض ومن فيهن وإن من شيء إلا يسبح بحمده. Like the heavens, or the seven heavens and the earth and all that is within them extols his glory. It means glorify God. And there is not a single thing except that it glorifies God and praises him. And then it was all, we were reading everything in the, as an understanding what it is meant by malakut. And so the more we become familiar with the malakut, the more we start being familiar with the glorification of things and their tasbihat. And somewhere, I don't know which window, we were also told that then as we witness their tasbihat, we are also made to participate. We also start glorifying God together with them and by their means. Like we use a tasbih, a rosary in our hand, the creation with around us and within us becomes the means, like the beads of the rosary, a means of tasbih. And in this window, for instance, at the end, it says, like we have, first, instead of like before it was we look at beings and we see. Now, instead of looking at beings and things, we are focusing on the qualities of beings and things directly. And of course, focusing on the qualities of things is going to change how we experience reality, how we experience the world. It starts with, or let me say what I understand so far. Next time something else may come, Allahu Alam. But so far what I understood, and then I'll go back to the text again. But so the more we focus on the qualities rather than the things themselves, we start realizing more and more how creation, but creation again, the English language, creation can, the word itself can be understood as static. But in Arabic, al-khalq is a masdar, so it's an ing form. But an ing form could be like a building and the process of building. Here, I mean the process of creation. However, most of the time when we focus on the qualities, then we realize that the world is actually a process of creation is happening. Things are coming and leaving. It's flowing, it's fluid, it's alive, dynamic, organic. Organic in the sense of life and death, for instance, and everything is always in motion, like in the 24th window. And it says here, now why is this important? Let me go to the text here. So the text starts talking about a struck points to a striker. A work of art necessitates an artist. An offspring requires a parent. So this is something that this reasoning we've already seen in the 18th window. Now he's saying, as under a top surface, actually the original is down requires up. We can't talk about down if there is no up. And let's say long and short, far and or distant and close, this kind, and so on. Like all these qualities known as relative matters, because they are relative. There is no up and there is no down on its own. Up exists only in relation to down and vice versa. They are relative to each other. These relative matters, which are not absolute and cannot exist without another. So he's saying, like, and if you have an art, it points to an artist. It requires an artist. In the same way, if you have up and down, cold and hot, such qualities, relative qualities, they contingency, which is apparent in particulars in the universe as well as in the whole, points to necessity. So all these relative qualities are contingent, and they point to necessity. Just like, does it make sense? The reasoning is, if you have a piece of art, there must be an artist. If you have up, there must be down, but there is no up and down in the creation out there. It doesn't matter. He's saying contingency because these things are contingent on each other, relative to each other. So, but everything, whatever is happening in the world, everything is contingent. Everything is dependent on something to be. It points to necessity. So this is the first point, that we have access to the concept of necessity, even though there is nothing that is necessary in the world. Everything around us is relative and contingent, yet we can have certainty of necessity, the necessary being that he's been talking about so far. He keeps saying the necessary being, the necessary being. Now he's saying because contingency indicates or requires necessity. And then he says the state of being acted upon, which is being seen in all, everything that exists, points to an act, and the createdness apparent in all things point to creativity, and multiplicity and composition, terkib, demands unity. And all these things, necessity, act, creativity, and unity, clearly and necessarily requires one who is not contingent. All these qualities can only belong to necessity, can only belong to a being who is necessary.
Dr. Yamina, maybe here it will be helpful to clarify what's meant by necessity here. It's used in a more narrower or technical sense, in the sense that in everyday life we use necessary, like table.
Here it means not dependent on anything.
Yeah.
Contingent, it means if something is contingent, it means it is dependent on other factors. And at the same time, it means if it is or it isn't, the world doesn't stop. If tomorrow I am not in this world anymore, the world doesn't stop, because my being is not necessary for the world to carry on. Because my being, my existence is only possible. Imkan here, contingency imkan has more meaning than just contingent. It's contingent and only it is possible, but it is not necessary. It itself depends on other factors to exist, but nothing depends on it. That's the opposite of samad. That's why Surah Al-Ikhlas, which is like the surah of Tawheed, we say, قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدْ اللَّهُ الصَّمَدْ. He is one unique and he is samad. It means everything needs him and is dependent on him, and he alone needs nothing because he's the one that everything needs.
Yeah, it's important to clarify this because we don't, it's not meant in the sense of, a table is necessary for a kitchen. It's very convenient, very important. It's necessary to have a car in Philadelphia or something. It's not in that sense of necessity. It's in the sense of, as you're saying, something
Absolute necessity.
additive, meaning that it's not contingent. Its existence is not contingent on something else. Whereas contingent, mumkin or contingency in can, is that which dependent on something other than itself. And so this is a bit more abstract than maybe other windows, in the sense that we look at the world and we infer that, wow, all of them are, contingent, all of them are finite, all of them are contingent. And so that, and then he identifies other things, that all of them are acted upon, all of them are changing. And all of these shared qualities point to something beyond. If there is contingent, then there has to be necessity. I think it really, I could relate to, well, I don't know if I can relate to, but I felt it was helpful to think about it as down and up, because you can't really talk about down without
More down created.
Yeah. So if
relationship. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so like when you say I went to the house and I stayed downstairs, even if I didn't go upstairs, even if that person didn't see upstairs, when he says downstairs, you realize that there's an up, you can't have downstairs without upstairs. So and then from there it's moving on to, if everything is contingent, is dependent, then there must be a being that's not dependent on anything, because if these are all of these are dependent on something other than themselves, then there must be someone who is not dependent and on whom others are dependent.
Yeah, it has been, this reasoning has been implicit so far, but now it's made explicit. Because you see, in the second part, when it says, in short, just as necessity is apparent from contingency, so necessity in the sense like Isra pointed out, in like this wujub, without him there will be nothing. He is necessary for existence to be, for everything to exist. Contingent means it can exist today, it may not exist tomorrow. It's okay, because nothing else depends really on it. It is itself being made. So he says, just like as necessity is apparent from contingency, the act of the state of being acted upon and unity from multiplicity and existence of the former indicate the latter with certainty. In the same way, qualities like createdness and having all their needs provided for clearly point to the existence of attributes of making and providing. So he's saying if something is provided for, it points to providing, and providing points is like a tongue. So the tongue, remember at the beginning, beings were tongues. And now the qualities of beings are the tongues. So it's becoming more subtle, more dynamic. It requires more reflection, more contemplation, because actually this is what's going on. But when we say things are like tongues and speaking, unless we are actually going through this, then we are skipping things. And that when we skip, what happens is that reflection does not last long, because it does not, how do you say, like it doesn't have a hold. It is not anchored in the self, in the heart, in the soul, because still there are so many holes in the reasoning. So there is no certainty yet. It means we feel that must be intuitively, must be like that, but it's not enough to say it must be like that. It has to be like that, and there is no other way. That's when the heart and the soul are really at peace. And so this reasoning, being explicit, is important. And we were taken step by step, slowly to this. So in the beginning it was, as he said at the beginning, in the 18th window, for instance, it was a fine work of art necessitates an artist. An offspring requires a parent.
Dr. Yamina, actually, Nartila has made a PowerPoint. Would you like to share, Nartila?
It's a work in progress, but yes, I didn't have enough time. I just started to put some things together, but yeah, I can share a little bit, of what I have.
Okay, thank you. And so now we have, so there are two new things have been introduced here. One is the necessary existent one, who is here. He is one, he's necessary existent, he is one, he's the creator of all things, he's the single one of me. And all this we get from the relative relationship of things, which means if they are relative, it means they are contingent, and therefore contingency of creation, of creatures, necessitates and requires a being who is a source that is necessary. And the second point is, again, through qualities going, is that is saying if something is provided for, it means there is providing. So the quality of creatures being provided for points or requires the existence of the attributes of providing. And that quality of providing is like a tongue of the hundreds of attributes of this sort, which they bear and they testify to the necessary existence. Once we already know his necessary existence now. Most beautiful names, for instance, he is the provider. That providing can only belong to that necessary existence, because nothing else is necessary. Everything is like myself, comes and goes. And why did I say like myself? Because this is important, like why focusing on the qualities is significant. When we get stuck in things and beings in themselves, then we are stuck in, let's say, someone called it horizontal perception, as if things are only horizontally connected. And it seems as though things exist in themselves independently of their maker. So it seems like causes have some, even if it's limited, power to create. So they don't, I am not aware of their contingency. For instance, I see a flower and I say the flower is beautiful, the flower is colorful, the flower is alive. And so, but without beauty, without color, without life, what is the flower? But in my mind, because I never questioned, I'm not saying it's not a quality, but I don't see it as a quality. I see it as not as a contingent quality, but as if it is an inherent quality, as if life belongs to it. Can't you see it's alive? Then when the flower wilts and it's not beautiful and it's not colorful and it's not alive anymore, then I am sad and I say it died, without reflecting on the meaning of dying and death, because life was not, didn't speak to me. Then life and even my sadness for The death does not speak to me. And so where did those qualities come from? Where those, not qualities, because they're not qualities now, these beings come from? Where did they go? It's unclear. We can't even ask questions like this at that level of being, at that level of mindfulness, because we take things for granted. We take for granted that's what a flower is, and it's bound to happen. It's bound to open up and grow in spring, and afterwards it's bound to die after some time, and we don't question it. When we moved from things to qualities mindfully, then we are starting, if it's a quality, then I am more likely to realize that this quality is contingent. Contingency comes first here because it's very important. Because if I don't realize that it does not belong to it, it is not essential to it, it is not inherent to it, then I cannot realize that it is being recipient of beauty and shape and form and color and life. And when I see it as receiving, being the recipient, that is when I start wondering, where is the source? So it's very, very important. And that's why he says here, the qualities require the attributes of the maker. For instance, providing, there is a providing going on, and then that providing is a tongue testifying to the necessary provider. So it's not any provider, there is only one provider already going on. It's like the life and death process. What is important here is that all these levels that in these windows so far, and all how beings speak and testify to their maker and reflect his beautiful names and praise him with his beautiful names, and glorifying him means two things. They glorify him means they are already saying causes other things ourselves. We cannot make this. Look, someone else is making it. Tasbih is already subhanallah. And in these windows, it's happening at various levels, and it goes hand in hand with the enfolding or the unfolding of this contemplation, reflecting, and the resulting awareness of this reality within us. We need to uncover it within us, which requires tazkiyah. So part of this tazkiyah, of this purification, is the first step is this afaq. Remember at the very beginning, the beginning of these 33 windows, the main ayah was that God shows his ayat fil afaqi wa fi anfusihim, in the outer world and within themselves. So we start with the afaq in the outer world, tafakkur, we contemplate and reflect, and the more we understand, because we are going to reflect according to the steps we are taught in the Quran, then that's the first part, necessary part of the purification of the self. And then we need to internalize what we learned and apply it to ourselves, to the self, through the ego, and intend to surrender. And the more we surrender, the more this truth will speak to me, to us, for instance, here the flower, it seems like the flower is alive. But then when I go through, first step going in the outer world is easier to surrender because it doesn't touch my my ego. And then I apply to my ego slowly, and like you also are being given life now. Actually, as Wais al-Qarani says in his dua, أنت الحي وأنا الميت. You are the living one because I am. How do I know? Because I look at myself, I am dead. So I'm not dead. Yes, I am alive, but it's not a life that is from me. It is a life that's, I'm only mirroring life. Life is not truly from me. Anytime I can fall dead, which means anything that I have, I say, but I know this. Yeah, I can totally forget everything, lose my memory tomorrow. How it's not like I know, I am made to know. So everything that we are applying here needs to be applied to our lives. Otherwise, it won't produce the light of Iman. And that it won't become Tawheed. And when we apply it to ourselves, to the extent that we apply to ourselves, when we go back to the creation, it will become clearer and clearer and easier because we tend to project our inner perception onto the world. So that's why sometimes we understand, yes, of course, everything is being made, and then after some time, again, we look at the rain and it looks like it is falling, and it looks like but part of us says, yes, okay, good, but without water, nothing will grow. And then we say, okay, band-aid on top of it. Yes, but Allah is making them grow with water. Just a second, that's not how it's supposed to happen. It is supposed to, I'm supposed to hear water testifying to the necessary giver of life. I'm supposed to hear the water and the process of life all together, glorifying God, making tasbih, saying La ilaha, there is no God, we are not God, I am not God, I have no life, I cannot give life, and saying yes, illallah. So I'm supposed to go to La ilaha illallah in every process. I cannot use a belief in God and just use it to, how do you say, like fill in those gaps, because those gaps, either they are because I never went through the faqi tafakkur, which means I never reflected in the outer world in the way I'm taught in the Quran. And so I don't know how to read the signs and how they are testifying to the oneness of God, how they are declaring La ilaha illallah. Or I've done that, but I am not internalizing it. And that's why I have to go back each time and I find myself, why isn't it moving? Yeah, because I need to fil afaqi wa fi anfusihim, and within myself. And actually, everything is there to help me in my path, because they show clearly, they make our Rabb known to us. And then we have to also confirm within, inshallah. That's why I found in the beginning, I said, this window is short, but what is it? And I just read it many times so I could keep it in mind while I'm walking. And that's what came to so far from my personal reflection. Wallahu a'lamu bil thawab, inshallah. Thawab. Anyone wants to share?
I like the idea of, like, I think, at least this is what I'm going to reword, the idea that if we focus on the qualities, like what is the outer world receiving here and now? So instead of, like, you know, then that would be actually, that would help us more. Like, so the flower is receiving here and now beauty, instead of calling the flower beautiful and looking, you know, and then trying to shortcut and say, oh, it points to a Jamil. But when I'm saying it is receiving beauty here and now, the more I'm saying it's receiving beauty here and now, and the flower in itself does not have, like you said, like the flower in itself is not necessary for existence. Like it could die anytime, it won't change anything, but the source that gives it beauty is necessary for all the beauty that we see. So that is stage one. Then take that and apply it on myself and saying, I'm receiving here and now, whatever it is, I'm receiving this emotion here and now, I'm receiving this appreciation of beauty here and now. So this appreciation of beauty that I'm receiving here and now is not, I'm not necessary for it, but the one who gives me the appreciation of beauty is necessary for every creature to appreciate beauty here and now. Is that the formula?
Just to clarify it and make it, inshallah, thank you, Alia. So in the afaq, in the outer world, there are two steps here when we look at the qualities. First, everything is contingent, up, down, everything is relative, everything is, so contingency requires necessity. Necessity requires a necessary being. This is the first. The second is that contingent being. Now we take it. Was it the flower you said? The flower is beautiful. There is a beautiful. I take the quality of the flower, beautifying, an attribute, and then the beautifying, the attribute, is a tongue testifying to the beautiful, the beautifier, the beautiful one who beautifies, the source of beauty who beautifies. And that beautifier, that beautiful one, is necessary because of the first step. Does it make sense? And now this afaqi, once I find the necessary one who is beautifier, provider, the beautiful names of the necessary existent one, then yes, I will apply it just as I applied it to the flower, to anything else. Water doesn't have life, cannot give life. I look at myself and I find that I have nothing. Everything is being given to me here and now. So not only, there are two things. One, it's contingent, it's not from me. Second, the quality. Doesn't it? Someone wanted to say something?
So do the two-step in the outside and do these two-step in the inside. Just affirm what is contingent and what is necessary, and then identify the quality.
Apply to every quality.
Everything.
Yeah. Inshallah. Yeah. When we finish the 33 words, we can either do the 19th word, or before that we can do the Sunnah Thaniya in the Risala, and then the 19th word. The 19th word is very, and while we're reading the 19th word, then we can also, actually lots of it is referred from the Shifa of Qadiyat, but I think we never,
Dr. Yamina,
yeah.
Nartila had the PowerPoint summarizing some of the things that she got from this class.
Please.
So even though we're kind of sort of almost done for today, but it's, I think it would be nice.
Yeah, and we can also have it at the beginning of next week, inshallah, before we start the 26th. But yes, please share. I actually thought it was
PowerPoint, so she can talk, and here is her PowerPoint, so she can talk and
present it. Yes.
Bismillah. Assalamu alaikum again. I read reading the window, and I find sometimes the words are kind of heavy, and I want to take it slow, I digest it slowly. So personally, I tried also to visualize. So this is the idea behind the slide. So you can go to the next one, Isra. So I tried to put, again, like I was taking each part of the window, and I kind of put it into like smaller and visual things. So this was one of the reasoning, and I know we have done this reasoning often, but I think it's important because we are not, I mean, even personally for myself, I feel like we don't sometimes look at things necessarily this way, right? Looking at things as isharas, they're pointing, as the ayahs, interacting with them. So in this particular slide, so looking at the artwork, and again, pointing to the artist, to the one who painted it. And the next slide also took the other information that I got from the window. Like, you look at the baby and the child, and there were parents, involved in bringing this child into life, right? And the other next slide also, the example that maybe we kind of mentioned few sessions.
Can I just ask something here about the parent and implies, well, child implies parent. Is it more like a definition, Dr. Yamina, like more like when you say child, there has to be parent because they are interrelational terms, like just as a definition, just as when you say down, there must be an up, because how could you say down if there's no up? So is it more about highlighting that the afia, that relativeness of certain terms, that you can't have one term without the other, not because the parents created the baby, not as a causal connection.
The sunnah, I mean, more in the sunnah of Allah, right? So it's like the way we kind of think, right?
The correlation.
No. Yeah, there is a relation.
I feel it's more like what you called it as relative things that
relational. It's a relation.
Yeah. Not relative that it's relational, dependent, like the kid
or son. There has to be a parent, right? It's relational. You can't call something a child or daughter or son without having parents implied in that very sentence. Now,
well, I mean, of course, there are the miracles that you go into.
Yeah,
but this is sunnah, like they're not conventional, like they're
exactly. That's why I want to say in Nartila. That's why, for instance, we don't call Prophet Adam alayhi salam a child because he's not a child, because he doesn't have parents, right? The term child implies parents. this isn't about it's because parents created or not created,
yeah.
or can God
Mm.
create
It's
God?
relational.
No, it's the idea that the moment you say a child, it implies that there's parents.
Hmm.
Otherwise, you don't call that a child. Look, say in Adam, we don't call it a child.
It's like up and down.
Up and down, like it's not like down made up or up made down. It's just that it's relational term. When you say up, there has to be down.
Why it's important? Because like we don't go into who created the child or not at this point. Is saying if things are contingent, it means there is that it requires necessity. This is very important because if there is necessity, that's it. Like all the atheist arguments are invalid because they reject any source of necessity. But like, why are you talking? It's like someone says, keep saying downstairs, but says there is no upstairs. What does it mean to say downstairs then? Like,
In the word, yeah, that's
but however, that is not enough to because like all religions will say there is a necessary being. However, the second step is the step of Tawheed, which is this is applied to every single quality. Because usually we say, yes, there is one, and then all the qualities belong to me, belong to you, belong to, and then
yeah, we just take, the idea that, it just created at some point, created, this, but then it's kind of living it, kind of running.
As if things are static. Man-made stuff may look static, but anything that is created is organic and needs sustaining. I mean, the other one also needs sustaining, but that's a second step. Let's start with.
And then we also use this reasoning, but again, talking about, what they're pointing to each other. So with the ball and the pottery, we kind of discussed, and we can go to the next one, Isra. I also looked, at the terms, so the contingent and dependent. These are not sometimes words that we necessarily use, even in our everyday life. So I just wanted to look a little bit different. We talk about contingent plans as if they are like alternate plans that we need to do in case of emergencies. So we don't necessarily use the word, contingency. So, but so looking at our definition for something to be contingent means it is dependent for existence. And this is, I think, the context we are discussing in this window. So something that cannot count for itself. It cannot exist on its own. Next slide. Next, so, and again, I was writing this kind of, we Dr. Yamina explained, you went over them, but personally, for me, it helped when I put them like one by one. I'm kind of writing them again, and I'm kind of, trying to process them personally. So pointing to the idea of the contingency, right? Pointing to the creator, who is utterly different than the thing itself, right? Though elaborating a bit, every created thing, so is a sign, again, points into the creator. And the big question, did you create yourself, right? So for that comes, in our conversation. So knowing the self.
Or did they create themselves?
Impossible. And then again, this language of reasoning that I think it's so important, and we need to, I mean, personally, I feel like, I need to incorporate using it more, right? Talking about like all the, what we're seeing in the Risala is talking about absolute and necessary and impossible. And that kind of language, I feel like we kind of we don't use, or I don't use it as much. So I just, I want to be more intentional in using, those terms more, I mean, meaningfully, in particular as it comes, to the matters of deen. So knowing the self, that I'm totally dependent. And then I know Dr. Yamina, mentioned, but go to the next slide, Isra. And the exercises that we have done, and we have talked a lot about the breath, right? So that is also bringing it more, right? So that is making, you know, that personal experiencing the dependency I have, right? You know, with the exercises of the breath, or just, you know, the heartbeat, having no control, and they could stop at any moment. So yeah, so that this was a little bit, you know, of I mean, I put this together, but it was more as an exercise for myself to understand and to interact with the window. So
thank you so much. I mean, personally, when I'm reflecting, at some point I have to have a piece of paper. I'm not like you, mashallah, made it into a PowerPoint immediately. But I have to work on paper, and I have, like, you know, those diagrams.
Yeah, but everybody here like has their own style of using. But yes, I mean, I feel like every word and every expression, like, you know, it takes a little bit deeper. Personally, you know, I to digest and understand. So that was my exercise. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing.
Salam.
Alhamdulillah. Thank you. MashaAllah. Anyone who wants to say anything, maybe on the PowerPoint with what Nertilas shared with us?
I love visuals, Nertila. So you've made this like
You
far much more
reminded me of you, Alia, because you immediately
digestible for me. Jazakallah kull
your
khair.
minds work in similar ways, mashallah.
This week, I read a bit from this medieval thinker, well, early modern thinker, Descartes, and he talks about imperfection. Imperfection, he says, I find in myself imperfection, but then there must be perfect, because how come I have the concept of imperfection if there is no perfection? And I am not perfect, so there must be perfect. And that's one of his evidences for the existence of God, actually. That's how he proves God. So when we talked about this relativeness up and down, I was reminded of that, you know, how, what we encounter in the world is imperfect and passing and contingent. And actually, that precisely becomes a window, because if all of this is contingent and coming from somewhere, then something that must be giving them existence, if they are not the sources of their own existence, if they are contingent. And same with the other qualities, like beauty, as Alia said, beauty is, you see it and then you realize beauty is contingent. This thing has beauty here, but then it goes. It's not from it, so it's dependent on something else. That must be the source of necessary beauty, because every other beauty we see is contingent, is passing, is not enduring. And I think there's also a whole discussion in classical Islamic theology on contingency, imkan, and
in one of the windows.
Yeah, I think it will unpack more in the one, but here it's kind of very simplified form, still a bit abstract and dense, but it's useful to really try to think also in these larger general terms, that here's a tree, here's it's contingent.
Eventually, I feel like it's okay if we don't know the words eventually, as long as we are familiar with the concept. Whatever words we give it. And the afaqi tafakkur, the reflecting on the creation out there, gives us that momentum to start and become aware. And then when we start applying it to ourselves, then we don't need to necessarily, like, I don't need to die before I find out that I am on a path of death, that kullu nafsin dha'iqatul maut, every soul is a taster, is tasting right here and now death, because then I just look at myself, and the more I contemplate, the more I see that my life is dependent on the breathing, for instance, and breathing is dependent on so many things, and none of them is under my direct control. And subhanallah, then you see that life is being breathed into me. I'm being infused with life, and clearly life is just going through me. It's like I'm the recipient of life all the time. So without the receiving of life, I have no life of my own. When Wais al-Qarani says, "Ana al-mayyit," I am the dead, it doesn't mean that he's dead in the grave. It means that I have no life of my own. I have no seeing of my own. I have no understanding of my own. I have no memory of my own. Sometimes something that you know very well, and you keep saying, I have it on tip of my tongue. What was it? What was it? Or I forgot something, but what is it? I can't even remember what it was that I forgot. Subhanallah. Like, clearly, the more we contemplate, that's why the anfusi, the inner reflection, is very important, because it makes everything clearer and it becomes easier to go through these reasonings outside. And so the veils that we see, for instance, when we see rain coming and it doesn't look like it's God sending water, as we are told in the Quran. We don't see it glorifying God, or it does not remind us of the beautiful names of God, because we see it as coming on its own. It means, I catch myself, means in my life, I forgot that I'm being made to act, I'm the recipient. I've forgotten, started living as if I am myself a small necessary source, as if I'm not dependent on anything, as if I am doing things, I am acting, I am seeing, which is all totally an illusion. It is not true at all. And that illusion is a veil onto the rububiyyah that I'm benefiting from day in, day out, here and now. And so when there is that veil, I am not in touch with my ubudiyyah, and my ubudiyyah is the mirror of rububiyyah. And then, as much as I'm aware of my ubudiyyah, I become aware of the ubudiyyah of everything and everyone else. And of course, it's not only I always say this, it's not only a process of understanding, it's also a process of choosing and intending to surrender. We have to choose to be willing. It's that will is like a switch on off. It's totally given to our hand. Sometimes it's because we don't know, but sometimes we know and we still resist for no good reason. That's what free will is about. That's why we need to pray and to pray for each other. May Allah make us soften our hearts and make us of those who are willing to surrender to our reality, to accept our reality, because we are created as abd, whether we acknowledge it or not, whether we are aware of it or not. And when we don't acknowledge, when we resist, we only increase our suffering. And the more we resist, the more everything becomes light upon light. Whatever is going on, the good and the bad, all become a means to light, to connecting to the eternal beautiful names of the necessary existent one.
Okay, inshallah. Then, Sarah, did you want to say something?
I was just going to say something that occurred to me, but Dr. Yamina, mashallah, just beautifully summarized everything that came to me. It just clicked. The word contingency for me was like a clarifying word on Nurtilla's slide. Jazakillah khair, Nurtilla, for being simply defined as depending on something else to exist. And so, yes, like Dr. Yamina just beautifully said, then all of a sudden, like that word, seeing it on the screen, immediately connected in a new connection to this concept of abd, because every one of my qualities, like I was doing something at the time while I read that, and I'm like, how does this even, my arm reaching, my eye seeing, everything is dependent to exist. Everything depends on something to exist. And so I know Dr. Yamina often says this, like, who's seeing when I see, or who's hearing when I hear? And oftentimes that really does, like, it's too deep of a question to stay with. But somehow with today's, mashallah, slide, Nutella, at the same moment, there was a click that went off, like, wow, every single thing that I see or that I experience in myself is dependent to exist. And it reminds me of 2 weeks ago, I think, the window that we discussed. The emphasis was to see how when things that we see outside, like a bird, for example, comes into existence, not only the bird, but all of its different qualities all together at the same time are being given, depend on something right now to exist all together at the same time, individually and as a unit. So it makes sense that when I start to see myself this way, it will immediately project onto other creation. So jazakumullah khair.
Jazakumullah khair, everyone. So inshallah we'll stop here, Dr. Yamina.
Yeah, inshallah. And inshallah, Ramadan Mubarak, may it be full of barakah, and we meet next time during the month of Ramadan, inshallah wa bi'idhnih.
Inshallah. So our next meeting will be a bit longer than a week. It will be inshallah in 10 days, not this Saturday, but the first Saturday of Ramadan at 2 p.m. Eastern time. And also the birds told me that there is some Receiving New Ramadan program coming up, like a personal program, daily program, that inshallah we can hold ourselves accountable to. Well, it's in the works, inshallah, and when it's done, we'll send an email, inshallah, before Ramadan, so that we can get started into spiritual diet during Ramadan.
Inshallah.
Sister Ali, Jazakallah khair, she's working on it, and we will check your emails. It will be sent on. We are receiving your email once it's ready, inshallah.
Inshallah.
And Yamina, do you want to meet shortly after we end the session? Inshallah.
Okay, inshallah. Amanillah.